those of you that were in the Lang Forum had a good discussion in there. I wasn't able to make it because we were having our own discussion in the department. Poli-sci, this is dealing with some of the same issues. And I don't know how many people are just standing here because there's a crowd and have no idea why you're standing here. And others standing here because you're smoking cigarettes and waiting to go back in for a break. And others that are here because maybe you know the reason you're here. So, a number of us called this gathering, speak out, whatever you want to call it, to address some of the issues that have been going on since the occupation last Friday, in particular dealing with the way that both New School, Security Administration, and NYPD have addressed and handled the situation on campus since last Friday. There's a couple things that we want to talk about today and hopefully get some other people up here talking, sharing their stories as well. The main thing that many of us who tried to get this event called for today want to address and reiterate to people is that we feel like the situation on this campus since last Friday, the way the administration has handled and authorized police force and security repression is both unacceptable, undemocratic, and against the history, ethics, and legacy of New School as an institution. Those are values that as a student community, we should be able to stand up for and clearly say, this is wrong, this is a problem. Yeah. You know, there's a lot of people debating whether or not they felt like the occupation on Friday was right, was done good, whether the rhetoric around it made sense, was too or not enough situationist, and many other things. We're not here to debate the nuances of theory and organizing rhetoric at this moment, but it's a discussion that should be happening at this school in general. The school used to be a key for theory, particularly in the 30s with the University in Exile. We need to revive that legacy again. But the most important thing right now is to talk about the immediate incidents. Regardless of whether or not you supported the occupation, thought it went good or bad, what we're arguing is you should still be able to say, even if I didn't like the occupation, I can take a clear stand on what happened Friday afternoon outside with supporters, students, and even passerbys, what happened Friday night and Saturday, and what's been happening since then on this campus. Just give you guys a few examples. How many people have seen the videos of individuals being pushed to the ground and assaulted by NYPD on Friday? If you haven't seen them, they're online. You can find them on YouTube, but through the New School in Exile, newschoolinexile.com. We put everything we found. New York Times has them as well. Google New School, NYPD, police assaults, brutality, and you'll probably find the hits. But that is just one incident. Friday night, while we were having a support rally at Union Square, there was a rally there and then a march. At about 11 o'clock, there was two different individuals that were arrested, one down towards 12th and 65 and one around the corner on 14th Avenue, on 14th, around the corner from 65 Street, sorry. During that time, I was filming the young female who was being arrested. Shortly after that, one of the shift security supervisors at this school, the same gentleman who was supposedly injured in the morning by having his leg shut in the door and was sent to the hospital, which has now been proved false and inaccurate, was also the one that assaulted me while I was filming on that videotape, and it is online as well.
What's his name?
His name is John Ben Nintendo, if I'm pronouncing it right. He is like the third shift supervisor for security. If you go to the New School's website, you'll find his name there.
This is Bob Perry, not a security officer.
This was a security officer. We need to make it, but that's an important point. We need to make a distinction between A, security administration, and B, the rank and file security who are working the desks. We need to keep that difference. I know some people disagree about police in general, but the actual assaults are occurring and being sanctioned by the top administration. That needs to be pointed out and reminded. Third, Monday, when the school had the emergency assembly at 12th Street, there were undercover security officers outside of the building watching and taking notes of people coming and going out of that meeting. I followed one of them, watched them get in their unmarked van and take off. These are incidents that are continuing to happen post-occupation with the continued administration support and sanctioning and the security apparatus on this school support and sanctioning. This is not what a school community who is dedicated to open academic investigation, inquiry, and political dissent should be doing. Sanctioning undercover officers monitoring emergency public meetings to address police brutality against students. It makes absolutely no sense. We need to keep focusing on these issues in the larger context. What's going on here is not just about police brutality, it's about why there was an occupation in the first place and the issues revolving administrative accountability at this school. However, we have to keep in mind that when we speak up and raise our voices on these very issues, the reaction we get from the administration is basically unaccountable, authorizing the police force, statements from the Board of Trustees saying that these actions were fine, we support the president on what was going on. In fact, we don't think the provost should have any role in what's going on. The entire event and the agreement, the minimum documents that was agreed when we hired Tim Marshall as the interim provost. One of the key things in that document was that there would be more accountability and transparency from the administrative side to the faculty, to the students, and to academic mission. That was clearly violated in the way the university handled, or in fact did not handle, its own policies. And I know there's students here who have spoken to that before. If they want to speak to that again, I'd be happy to let them talk about that regarding the demonstrations policy at this school, regarding how the administration unilaterally, Bob Kerrey unilaterally makes decisions while at the same time claiming to want transparency, accountability, and across the board shared governance. You cannot have shared governance if at the most crucial moment of your school, when political dissent is at its height and students are taking over buildings. Political accountability means addressing those students, and in particular if they're calling for the provost to come and negotiate with them, to ignore the provost and send in the NYPD. That is neither transparent nor accountable, and it needs to be made clear. What we need to do is remember that this is a school of a lot of students. We have a lot of different political views, a lot of ideas, and a lot of agreements and disagreements. But what we need to be doing right now, what is most important right now, is to be raising awareness about what's been happening, talking to individuals about what's been happening, documenting incidents of security, police, either injustice, harassment of students, as well as talking about the fact-finding missions that people have called for, the independent investigations that people have called for, and holding not only the president, but also the Board of Trustees accountable to us. We are the people that this school exists for. We are the people that keep this school running through our salaries, through our non-salaries for most of us, through our tuition that we pay here. This is critical if we are serious about reclaiming the new school as a democratic institution, a school dedicated to progressive educational values, open public dissent and discussion. Those things cannot happen if we have an administration that's not only hostile to, but is unwilling to support those actions going on. So next Wednesday, the Student Senate has called for, before any of the occupation happened, essentially an all-student assembly. One of the things that we're urging people to do is at that assembly, call on the USS on behalf of us as the student body to not only reaffirm a vote of no confidence in Kerry, but to ask both the Faculty Senate and Tim Marshall, the interim provost, to authorize and formally announce an independent investigative committee that will be looking into abuses, both documentable and alleged, to find out what in fact happened. Because there are multiple stories running around, there's no doubt about that. But there are certain stories that we know are blatantly false. And some of those stories have been perpetuated over and over and were just again repeated in the New York Times by Bob Kerrey in his letter. We need to be holding the administration and the board accountable to what official statements are made by the school about our students. Yeah. This is critically important right now because we're having a rhetoric going on in the public from the president saying students are violent, students are anti-democratic, and students are essentially terrorists. This is not a rhetoric that should be acceptable anywhere by an administrator, regardless of their position, but in particular the president of the New School against student protest. If we are serious about holding open discussions and dialogue, there is absolutely no way we can watch as our president says these students are hooligans and terrorists, they are violent, they're anti-democratic. You cannot have an open discussion with that rhetoric because it immediately shuts down any possibility of open dialogue. We need to condemn those statements and the political backing and the political logic that those statements represent because they are a threat to our very academic community.